Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on this very cold, wet evening. Um, we are basically bringing you this event as part of the Explore Your Archives campaign. For those of you who don't know, that's a year-long campaign during raising awareness of various local history and national collections across the country. So this is part of our Explore Your Archives campaign, most of which has been taking place online on our social media channels. So if you haven't had the chance, please do check out our Twitter and our Facebook and see some of the stuff we've been sharing. And then over to you all. Some of your names I'm very familiar with, some of you are regulars, and thank you for joining us and supporting us. Anyone else who's joined us, please do just give us a shout in the chat box, say hello, let us know where you're from. Like I mentioned, Jen's based in Stepney. I'm joining you from Bow in Tower Hamlets. Whether you're in Tower Hamlets or well way beyond Tower Hamlets, please do say hello and let us know where you're joining us from, just to give us a sense of the geography. It's been really wonderful hosting these online sessions of the last few months and having people from the States and France and all over really join us. So lockdown has actually introduced us to an international audience, which has been great. So for those of you who don't know about the Local History Library, I'll just let you give you a bit of an introduction. We are the repository for historical materials for Tower Hamlets, where the world famous East End is based. Our collection houses images, maps, pamphlets, newspaper cuttings, oral histories, films, and of course, what you are keen to hear about, building plans. So this session will be split into two sections. I will be talking about our building control files, and then I'll hand it over to Genova to talk about our rolled plans. Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you for the hellos in the chat box. Thank you very much. I will be looking at the chat box as I go, so sorry if I sort of cut off. Hello to Roger from Shadwell, Glenn. We know you from the Island History Trust. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for that. Jen will talk about the roll plan collection in the second half of the presentation. The whole of the presentation will be recorded and then available on our YouTube channel at a later date. Usually we upload it within a week or two of the event happening, so you won't have too long before you have it online. So I will start sharing my screen. And I'll start my half of the presentation. After Jen finishes her half, we'll have a chance to have a chat. We'll talk a little bit about access. I mentioned in my email that there's varying sort of degrees of access to these collections. There's lots of challenges at the moment to accessing these collections. So this really is very behind the scenes in some sense. And we'll also tell you about online catalogue. And as you know, we've had sort of a closure and a reopening due to lockdown. So we'll tell you what the situation is in terms of booking with us going forward. Okay, I'll share my screen now. If you'll excuse me just a sec. Okay. So, as I mentioned, I'll be talking about the building control files. So what are the building control files? The building control files are an important collection that can be used to understand the built environment of Tower Hamlets. They provide information about the development of new buildings, housing schemes, places of worship, public buildings, such as schools and health centres, commercial and industrial premises, and what some may refer to as dead buildings or even temporary buildings. The files cover a varied period of time, some of them spanning even 100 years. So alongside physical geography, the files can be used to research businesses and industries within the borough. For example, Limehouse Town Hall was used as the National Museum of Labour History before serving as the Wapping Neighbourhood Office, and Number 2 Approach Road was changed from a house in multiple occupation to provide a rehabilitation home. In addition, some files provide information on war damage repairs, including the works carried out and their cost. So there are about 9,000 building control files. That's 9,000 building control files, not 9,000 BC. And about 1,600 of them are searchable on the online catalog on Calm. But beyond that, there are actually about 7,000 more that are not yet searchable. So that just gives you a sense of how much actually is not at all accessible. It's still going through the process of being made accessible. The building control files relate to a diverse range of premises, almost any sort of premises you could think of. And I've mentioned a few, but domestic, commercial, school, religious buildings, pubs, stations, and factories. And it's because of this, because of the diversity of the premises that some of these files cover, that it's, I think, excited a lot of people since we made the announcement, even around this event. And I'll tell you more about what we're planning to do with these. So what's in the building control files? So this list is not exhaustive at all. And there's a huge variety in what you could find in the building control files. We might not even have all of it listed here, and I might not even mention all of it. We sort of find more things as we go. It's still a new territory in lots of ways for us, at least definitely for myself and Genova, who are sort of part of the outreach and engagement team, and our archivist who's dedicated to working on this collection. Obviously has learned a great amount, and even she would say she's learning more every day. So what's in the building control files? We have correspondence, building notices, planning applications, works, initial notices for works, commencement notices, planning permissions, listed building sort of considerations, dangerous structure notices, if there's any notes of irregularities in the building, structural calculations, cost calculations, lots of deposits of plans and planning applications, site inspection reports, photographs, very interestingly. That's quite a precious one to come across. So if you have lots of correspondence, and then you just see a batch of photographs that are falling out as well, of the file that you've had the chance to look at. Excuse me as I admit a few more people in. And of course, the building plans themselves. So this is really to impress upon you that when you open these files, the boxes and boxes of them that we do have, you're not just going to get lots of visual plans. You might get letters, you might get business cards, you might get photographs as well. It's a real pick and mix, actually.
I just wanted to mention, sorry, Halima.
Please go ahead while I try and get to the next slide.
I just wanted to mention as well that that 1,600 and something are catalogued. The other 7,000 are not necessarily catalogued, but sometimes we do make them available on a case-by-case basis. So some people say, I'm interested in, I don't know, commercial 175 Commercial Road. And sometimes we can make them accessible. Obviously, we have to take out personal information or sensitive data, but there is still scope to see and access those ones that are not yet catalogued.
Thank you so much for that, Jen. That's very true, and yes, so it is accessible, and we do take inquiries about them all the time, actually. Just a little bit of background about how did we get these files. So the biggest transfer came to us in 2011 from the planning department. The London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council Planning Department were the depositors for this, and they are responsible for planning in the borough. We receive transfers from them regularly for usually temporary or demolished buildings. However, for the biggest transfer, the one that's being catalogued currently, includes lots of buildings, not just temporary or demolished buildings. Just to let you know, the plans were, excuse me as I admit a few more people, apologies. So the plans were found in storage or in council buildings, and I think that building was about to be demolished in itself. So the council decided to transfer over to us. I don't think they were actually aware of the extent of the collection or how special it is. I think that's what's really interesting in our line of work, trying to convince our colleagues as well in other departments in the council that actually this is quite precious material and it will be of huge value to researchers. And I'm sure if anyone's from the sector who's joined us today would be nodding vigorously at that, that often sometimes there's some very unique collections are under at risk or under threat because sometimes our colleagues do not understand the value of it. So we do lots of work trying to preempt that and let our colleagues know really what's of value and what we are definitely interested in keeping. So sometimes the files cover the Greater London Council and sometimes the London County Council, because when London Borough of Tower Hamlets was created in 1965, the powers that transferred over to LBTH, it came with the responsibility for building control and planning. This meant that the files were transferred to us, and so we have a really unique sort of track or record of sort of that handover of going between different authorities. So there's a really mixed bag in terms of the context between the GLC and the LBTH. If you do go into the online catalogue, we have some of the admin history for the different local authorities actually added to that. I won't go through all of it. Some of you might be very familiar with it already. But we will tell you at the end of the session how to access the online catalogue as well if you are not familiar with that. Apologies, it's just taking a second to change slide. Please bear with me. Not changing yet.
If you use the arrow at the bottom on the left-hand side, there's like a little arrow if you go to the corner. Because sometimes when you press your arrow, it doesn't want to do it.
Hang on, let me get rid of that. No, it's not working. Hang on. I'll try one more time and then I'll stop screen sharing and try again. Apologies for this. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. So what is this useful for? There we go. So what is this useful for and what sort of research has come out of these files? The building control files can be incredibly useful for our researchers when the bits are available and the bits that have been
Oh dear, I think we lost.
really in detailed and in.
Sorry, Halima, we lost you for like a minute, maybe 45 seconds.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I will go back. Okay. So the building control files can be incredibly useful for our researchers. The files are relevant to understanding changes and development in the built environment in Tower Hamlets. They record the architectural history of many buildings in Tower Hamlets, some spanning up to 100 years, as I mentioned before. The files are incredibly detailed. They go in depth, well beyond what our other collections offer, and are of architectural relevance, offering insights into the structure design. Both commercial and personal research requests can gain a lot of value from this. So where we have image collection of a building that you're interested in, It might not necessarily offer you an idea of what the interiors are like or what the base plans are like. So we might recommend you look at the building control files to add more depth to your research. The files also offer a rich source of social research, even though you might not seem it from the outset. The files can reveal demographic changes in an area or wider impact for change on the community at the time by tracing what sort of buildings were in place and what the buildings were used for and how people were using them. So Jen's been really great at already outlining some of the access and restrictions we have. And we were a bit nervous about doing this talk actually, because not all of it's accessible. We don't want to raise people's hopes. But we also wanted to shout about it a little bit and offer something quite special for Explore Your Archives. So we're going to be very clear about what is available and what isn't and how you might access it so that we're quite clear from the outset so that we're not disappointing anyone. So where does this leave us with trying to access the collections? We are pleased to have almost 2,000 files searchable by the public on our online catalogue. However, almost 7,000 are not available via the catalogue. But as Genova mentioned, the files can be requested on a case-by-case basis. We get regular inquiries through our inbox about building plans or documents, usually leading users to using the building control files. However, there are some restrictions. Some of the records, such as planning applications, correspondence, and building notices, contain personal data. Therefore, these records are being separated and closed for 82 years, allowing for the file to be made accessible at a later date or through very, very special permissions. I'm just going to move on to a quick example, and then I'm going to hand over to Genova. So I wanted to offer a really practical example of how the building control files have been used. Excuse me. So has anyone heard of the survey of London Whitechapel? For those of you who haven't, please do have a look at their website. It's fantastic. Shahid Salim and co have used our files extensively, and we worked quite a bit on this with them. Definitely my predecessors did, because it was a very long project. The files have been used extensively by the survey, and this is an example of how it can be used to offer rich insight into an area, very local, in-depth research study, which this is. So if you look at the Survey of London Whitechapel website, you will see the histories of buildings such as the East London Mosque, and citing the use of the Tower Hamlets building control files. This is an example of the Wilton Music Hall files. And you can see in the background there's St Andrew's Way in Bromley by Bow as well. But I've opened up Wilton Music Hall here, and it just gives you a sense of the basement plan. And I think this is from their 1996 files from 1996. And it just shows you the possibility of using the collection, and once it is formally available, and the ability to have these sorts of files at your disposal to add more detail to your research. It also gives you an understanding of what the situation is in terms of storage for anyone who's from the sector and interested in sort of archival storage. This is incredibly neat and organized compared to what situation it came to us in. So it's about 2 rooms of about 300-400 boxes.
Sorry, but the slides are not changing.
Apologies. What slide can you see?
We are still stuck on the survey of London Whitechapel, where you show, the plans and.
Yeah, that's the one we're on.
Side. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. But do let me know if you are worried about that. That does happen. Yes, I was just mentioning storage. We were fortunate enough to have a cataloguing archivist employed on a 2-year contract to organize the building control files, and she did a fantastic job in trying to get it into just a semblance of sort of organization. So we are in a position to at least know vaguely where things are. And I think this gives you an idea of how we're still getting there in terms of ensuring that all of the materials are in the right order, in the right sort of files, and organized at file level. But we have made a huge, I think, advancement in this just over the last year and a half, which is why we wanted to share it through this event. So I'm going to leave it there on the building control files and hand it over to Genova to talk about the rolled plans. Jen, just let me know when you want me to switch slides. I'll go to the first one now.
Will do. Evening, everybody. I'm Genova, and I'll be just talking about another collection associated with the built environment in Tower Hamlets. So this is the roll plans and architectural drawings. There's two examples here. I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in a moment. So the collection is an estimated 4,000 rolled plans or architectural drawings of buildings in Tower Hamlets. I say 4,000. We don't actually know exactly how many we have. I will show you a picture of them in the stacks in a moment. I'm just assuming it's around 4,000. I myself have only looked at about 200 of them in detail, but there are 4,000 plus, I would say. And these are created by Tower Hamlets or its predecessors, and they were transferred to Tower Hamlets Local History Library and Archives in 2016. Majority of the plans are kept in rolled up in tubes. Some of the plans are also just rolled up loosely with string or paper and tape as well. And some of the plans show various architectural drawings, which include elevations, sections, artistic representations, floor plans, and site surveys. Site surveys are quite unique as they show the proposed locations of the new developments, including new street names, old street names, and yeah, they're quite detailed, so they're pretty interesting. Some of the tubes contain as little as one plan rolled up, and some I've discovered have as much as 70 plans rolled up inside the tube, which is quite tricky getting them in and out of the tube and keeping them in the right order, and making sure that none of the plans get damaged. Halima will know as well that she's held onto one side of the tube while we're trying to get these 70 plans back into the tube. So yeah, they're quite heavy going. So the collection itself is a major part of the heritage of Tower Hamlets and its residents, and it is of particular significance in recording the building's architectural detail, most of which still house residents or those with connections to the borough, as all plans are of developments erected in the last 100 years. As I said, the collection was transferred in 2016, and like the building control files, they were not stored in the best way, and so some of the plans have suffered some damage after being transferred to Tower Hamlets with the abolition of the GLC, or the Greater London Council, in 1986. We also have plans from the London County Council and the Inner London Education Authority. And on the left side here, you'll see a plan of a school which was produced by London County Council and the ILEA, and it's Blakesley School, which eventually became Tower Hamlets School, which then is now Mulberry School, Mulberry Girls School. And on the right, we have elevations of Tredegar Estate, and that's in 1973. That has been demolished, but it was a really large housing estate. I remember it well. The collection will spark prominent interest in housing and looking at plans of housing. There was a report by Tower Hamlets in 2016 that suggests that in 1981, over 86% of Tower Hamlets housing stock was owned by the local authority, and 82% of households living in Tower Hamlets lived in council housing. So a large number of borough residents will have heritage interest in the rolled plans collection, and significant investment needs to be made in making these plans accessible. The collection also includes plans of industrial buildings. We also have hospital plans. I found a plan of the Jewish hospital, which is now the London Independent Hospital. As you can see, we have schools, and there's also community buildings, such as community centres and mother maternity centres as well. I found a couple of those. Oh, next slide, please. No worries. Thank you. So what research are these plans, will these plans be useful for? So once catalogued, the collection offers major opportunities for research. Some of the most obvious are researching for private, commercial or community future developments, which could also be used in conjunction with the building control files. The plans would also be useful in revealing the wider social context. All the plans are of major developments, and they reveal some social events happening in the area at that time. For example, major developments made after World War II with extensive bomb damage to Bethnal Green and Poplar. After the war, the LCC embarked on a permanent housing programme, which meant the sweeping away of whole neighbourhoods. Even the war damage was not too bad. The strategy was one of modernisation and renewal, not of repair. The aim was to redevelop districts and not just houses. Consequently, from the 1950s and well into the 1970s, large housing estates were built throughout Tower Hamlets. And here you see there's a picture of a plan of this. An image of a site survey, so that's one of the plans that I was talking about earlier, that just show where all the blocks are going to be. And it's just really interesting to see all the street names as well. What you can see the whole plan anyway, it shows you like all the surrounding streets and what their new names are going to be, and also the names, their current names. The plans will also be useful for individual researchers. Many visitors to the reading room make reference to if viewing plans and if we do hold any plans, as they still live in those buildings, and lots of these buildings are still homes for many of the residents, and they hold personal meaning. This is also the case for inquiries that we receive, email inquiries. I'd say about 8 to 10% of inquiries we receive are asking about architectural plans or any plans of housing estates or buildings, and if we have any that people can view. The potential for these plans to be used in outreach workshops and community projects and partnerships is huge, especially exhibitions and events. And the accessibility to these plans could open up more prospective partnerships, and it would be a unique way for residents to connect with the borough and those that are new to the borough, as well as helping to address wider social issues and strengthen the local community. Next slide, please. I think this is my picture coming up. Yeah. So here you see 2 images of me. So you can see how the road plans are kept and how many there are, where I got my guesstimation from. On the opposite side as well, so where I'll be facing, there is another stack with a load of plans on it as well. So there are a lot of road plans, and there's me in my hazmat suit. Usually I do have the hood up as well, and sometimes I have goggles on, just because sometimes you can open a tube and the tube hasn't been opened since, the 70s. So we don't know what's hiding in there. But access, there are physical issues related to the condition, as well as arrangement issues. Most of the plans have not been listed, so it makes them completely inaccessible. Unlike the building control files, which you could request to see and have some kind of arrangement, there is none here at the moment. And some of the plans do require urgent conservation treatment, and hopefully we'll be in a position to make some of those that are in better condition accessible, just like the building control files, and separate them out and repackage them. So if somebody says, I would like to see the Tredegar estate, the Lefevre estate, then we could possibly make them accessible if they're in good condition. And all of the plans have been listed as well. So those will be the future plans. So why bother talking about the plans if you cannot see them? Well, it's a really amazing collection. And it's been great working with the collection. And as this is Explore Your Archives, this is kind of some of the stuff that we do in the background. And hopefully when we get some funding and putting these under the spotlight, hopefully will help us to get some funding and make these accessible as soon as possible, really. Yeah, so those are the issues with access. But a lot of the time when people do ask to see plans that we do have plans. We do have a few plans in the archives that are catalogued. And there are a few plans available in the building control files, so sometimes you can get lucky. But yes, it would be great to have this collection available to see ASAP. Next slide, please. So this is just a couple of plans from, I just like these ones. This is one of my favourites, and these are workmen's dwellings. So there's about 15 plans rolled up in a tube. And these plans are from 1904, and these were produced by the Metropolitan Borough of Stepney. And these show images. These are drawings and elevations of dwellings that would be designed for families of the working classes and industrious classes, and also single labourers in the 1900s. These plans reveal that local authorities were providing housing for the working classes, and newer housing estates were being erected in all three of the metropolitan boroughs at the time, after the Working Class Acts of 1890 and 1900. One of the earliest housing, or the first housing estate, as I do believe it is, Arnold Circus, opened in 1899. And these workmen's dwellings would have been erected, and these dwellings were erected just off of Free Colt Street in Limehouse. And these would have been erected after major slum clearance in the area. So these will be great plans for researchers or academics interested in the social changes and improvement in living conditions for the working classes. So I just like these plans in particular because they are very colourful. And majority of the plans are not this colourful. And these are some of the earliest plans that we have, and they are in pretty good condition considering that they are some of the oldest plans, like well over 100 years old. Yeah. So yeah, these are really great. But yeah, that's it with the role plan collection. I wanted to make it a little bit visual as the collection is not yet available to access just yet.
Thank you, Jen. So I think we can move on to comments or questions or even inquiries that you might have. We'll try our very best. We might even just make a note of it and recommend you also get in touch with our archivist directly. But if you do have any comments or questions, please just unmute yourself and give us a shout, or pop it into the chat box. I'm having a very close look now.
Yeah, I do love these plans. They're great.
Please go ahead, Jenny.
Hi. You mentioned that there was some information on demolished buildings. Would that be, would some of those buildings be some that were built far back, say in the early 1800s, but were demolished in the 1950s? Or would they be more modern buildings?
Jen, do you?
Sorry, I was, yeah, I was just, I'm just going to answer, is that right?
Yes,
Sorry.
please go ahead. Yeah.
So for the most part, as far as I'm aware, the building control files and the role plans, but mainly the building control files are just buildings that have been erected in the last 100 years. So those buildings that would have been erected in the early 1800s, you would have to probably find out what governing body erected those buildings and where those records would be held. But these are just from buildings erected in the last 100 years, despite when they were demolished. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing was that when I lived in Poplar, the house we lived in was built in the early 1800s, and we moved out in 1953 when it was demolished because of the new Blackwall Tunnel being built. And I just wondered whether any of you talk about demolition, whether there would be anything relating to those sort of houses, or whether they just got rid of them.
It could be that there's a mention of them, especially if something else has been put in its place. If so there might be a mention of what was there before and some information of who erected it and when it was built, and then talking about when the plan, what is going to become. So it might have a bit of information, but I can't say 100%. It's worthwhile looking. There's
interesting to find out. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? I'm keeping an eye on the chat box.
I wanted to ask something, Halima.
Hello, welcome, Suresh. Please go ahead.
Suresh.
How beautiful! How very, very beautiful. So how's the funding? Where are we looking for funding?
Good question. Currently, so go ahead, Jen. Do you want to go first?
Sorry. So before lockdown happened and lots of things got put on hold, there was the plan to apply for funding from Archives Revealed. So there's still hope that we will be able to obtain funding in the next year or so. But it's just us doing things like this and getting people interested and kind of putting the spotlight on it and showing beautiful images like this, and hopefully will help us get funding a bit quicker.
And just one more question from me. Do you know, the storage looks very, as a trained architect. Hello? Oh.
Sorry. Oh. I don't know what happened there. There we go.
It's very romantic the way they're stored, but I think, is there any plans for them to be stored to do with climate and the environment and the temperature, because they are very, very beautiful drawings, and in time they will deteriorate. So
yeah,
I'm just wondering about if there was any plans also for the sort of storage, and are they going to be stored somewhere in a temperature gauge or?
Yeah, no, thank you, Suresh, for raising that. I mean, the BC files, the temperature are in temperature control storage, in that we check the temperature and we make sure that they're at a certain level. And the role plans definitely we hope to work towards that. Once there's different processes, I think Jen's working on listing it initially, just to get a sense of the extent of a collection. Then you can plan for storage in ideal conditions. But you're absolutely right. It is the long-term ambition of doing it, and certainly the collections are valuable and deserve that.
Yeah. And it's such a large, especially the role plans, and the building control files as well. But the role plans is such a large collection that's come quite recent, and we've already up to our eyeballs with capacity for our collections already. So trying to fit them in the strong room would be very difficult. But obviously this is great for funding and obviously getting us better and larger storage space for the collections. So it's all great. Hopefully for the future, of extending our storage space for archive collections that are at risk.
Yeah, just to give you a sense of that, the example again that Jen brought up, which is on the screen now, that's all from one roll. That's one roll. And how many items were in there? 12 or and so in an ideal world, each of these would be flattened out and stored at file level in their own sort of packaging, instead of sort of being rolled up all in one canister. And that takes more space basically as well.
Yeah.
So it's overwhelming actually.
Because they're so beautifully drawn, and I think architect students, I studied at the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL, and I know Reba would be absolutely beautiful. I mean, but architect students, people to see these drawings, because they're, a lot of them are hand executed, and it's very, very beautiful. You can see things now which are like AutoCAD and computer drawn. They haven't got that sensitivity, and just looking at them, because they're Tower Hamlets, and I'm born and bred Tower Hamlets, they have that very, very beautiful sense of sensitivity, which is really important for our children to see in schools, in design and technology and art. It's got such a sort of technical, but also such an aesthetic wonder that would be beautiful to share with kids and all, from all ages. It's a treasure.
Yeah, you're so right. It's a really amazing collection, and it would enhance the rest of our collection so much, especially using for kids and students, and the amount of people that already do ask to see them without even seeing what we've got. There's just so much scope, especially for outreach with the bold plans.
Could I possibly ask a question?
Please, Hannah.
Sure.
Absolutely fascinating and absolutely beautiful. Really, really interesting. And golly, you've got such a rich collection there. It's just amazing. I guess I've got a couple of unformed questions, so apologies first off. One thing I wanted to ask, with particularly looking at these workmen's dwellings of 1904, why are they? I mean, you made the really interesting point that these are the most colourful, and they are the earliest, or of the earliest drawings that you have. Why do you think that they are so beautifully presented? Because I mean, Suresh, the point you were making about the sensitivity here is really key. I mean, these are so beautifully presented. And why are these so presented so colourfully and with such care? Do you have any insight into that? Because I think that's really interesting.
Any architecture students here?
I wish I could answer.
Suresh, please go ahead.
I mean, I studied architecture a very long time ago, and the beauty was in the drawings. And Hannah, your question is, it's like, the beauty of the drawing sold the design, and people just treasured that, treasured that, and the draftsmanship and the people who were studying architecture or planning had that real sensitivity to drawing, and they were obsessed with 0.5 pencils and leads and coloured pencils, and it was also a piece of art, and it was also, and I do love the idea that these were dwellings for people, for and they were owned by the council, and they were for the public. They were, and you see these sort of lifeless, boring glass blocks now, which are, and the drawings are just lifeless. They don't have any beauty that people would live in them, and so this sort of sensitivity, even with the cross sections, had a sense of like, you can know where the brickwork is, where the tilings are, where the lead is, where the copper is, and that kind of sort of beauty of the tectonics of the material came out in the pencil and the draftsmanship, and it's a wonderful, wonderful piece of art, really. The way they executed, you drew a brick so it looked like a brick.
Yeah. It makes it feel very tangible. you know, it makes you feel like you're really seeing the textures of the building, which I think makes it beautiful, but it also makes it feel more like a lived space, or a space that can be lived in, that can be experienced. And I think in that sense, that's where some of the architectural practices of more recent years seems to be falling by the wayside, that actually spaces aren't necessarily perceived as lived spaces as they're being developed. And I'm wondering whether this sort of interest in the sort of giving it a more tangible feel is actually making it that much more of an engaged space. I don't know, I'm waffling actually, but I just think they're gorgeous. I really do. I just wanted to ask also, apologies, and then I will shut up. But I did want to ask, how much engagement, how much outreach do you do with the community about particular engagements within their own lived environment, and then their wider surroundings of community interactions in the Tower Hamlets area? And I wonder, is there any sort of, it'd be really, really interesting to find out more about what you do. That I'm currently developing a project about emotional engagement in home, and I want to really engage with communities in home. So there's so much here.
Well, first of all, thank you, Suresh and Hannah, for making us fall in love with all of it all over again. You know, we're going to quote you on the funding applications, basically.
For sure.
You know, yeah, that was very beautifully put from an architectural point of view, which is not mine or Jen's background at all. So thank you. In terms of community engagement, I mean, all of our community engagement is place-based engagement, I would say. It's just how you do it. I've actually not used the role plans, surprise, surprise, very much, or the building control files very much. But what we do quite formally in a schools context is we do a lot of schools-based, place-based study in Key Stage 2, which is year 5s and year 6s. They study World War II, but they look at the local area, the impact of bomb damage. Bethnal Green, for example, because it's because it's quite well documented in the collections, comes up a lot. We have lots of coverage around bomb damage, changes to streets, schools being damaged, rebuilt, new green spaces appearing because, you know, entire areas were decimated. So we do that sort of very close level engagement, especially at that level at Key Stage 2. And that's just through our formal engagement. More informally, we are always approached by various community partners, community organizations who are interested in their own place-led engagements. And, you know, we're always amazed and overwhelmed actually by the vitality and creativity of the local community, and we just try and cope and run with it and support them as best as possible. You know, we work on a number of partner projects in a year, you know, up to 6, 7, 8 even. And what we do in doing that is make the collections available to support that. So yeah, it's a very open-ended answer because we get lots of requests. I mean, just in this week alone, I've met with Four Corners Archive, Four Corners Gallery, and they have their own archive on Roman Road, and they're hoping to do a Bengali photo archive, which is again, an exploration of the local area. They want to look at collecting photographs depicting family life in the local area. You know, we're working with Queen Mary on a AHRC application, which I've heard is successful, which is looking at language interactions between Yiddish and Bengali and Cockney slang and so on, and that will be explored through our oral history collection. So the opportunities are endless, and I'm always just sort of blown away by the ideas actually. So if you are interested, for example, please just get in touch and we'll see what we can do.
I will. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely eye-opening. I think it's just fantastic, and to have this, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's genius. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'm just going to pop in, have a look at the chat box. Sorry if I've ignored you. I was just listening. People just mentioning plans, some plans existing electronically. Glenn mentions, I always ponder how and why such fantastic collections are so uncared for and damaged. Why do you think this has happened? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate they're in the position that they are in. You know, it is worth mentioning that lots of collections are in this position before they are part of a formal sort of funding bid and archiving project. I can say that they're in a much better state since Jen's worked with them and since our archivists have worked with them. You know, it's come a long way in the last year and a half, 2 years actually. So it can only get incrementally better. But yes, it's you know, it does come down to funding and capacity, and you know, and so on. And we're in a very fortunate position at Tower Hamlets where we do have colleagues with the expertise to be able to support, but not always the capacity to do it.
And the council didn't necessarily know the kind of treasure trove that they had. They just got basically the abolition of the GLC in the late 80s. It's just like, here's all this stuff that you have to take now. And it's like, oh, where are we going to keep all this stuff? And at the time, they haven't got the time to look for everything and be like, oh, this is from 1904. This is amazing. They haven't even been opened, some of them. So it was like when they was on the brink of losing it completely. It's just when they were like, do you want it to us? And then we've had the chance to actually discover that it's an amazing collection. So it's a shame, and things are getting better when, just as long as the archives, the archives are working closely with the council to make sure that future deposits are being transferred in the right way and that we're not losing anything or anything's not coming under any kind of damage.
And we are doing that more and more. We preempt that. We sort of get in touch with our colleagues before it gets to a point where we have to, you know, rescue things. But the other point Jen is making is that around heritage and risk. Unfortunately, sometimes the only time funding is attracted to a project is if you say it's at risk. So sometimes it has to get to that point where you say, if you don't do something now, you know, XYZ might happen. And it's unfortunate it has to get to that point. Why isn't the funding there? It's not necessarily the council, really. There's lots of other bodies who could support us in this actually as well. So, and we are seeking that funding as well. But yeah, it's a shame we need to get to this point to make our point. Any other questions or comments? I'm just gonna pop into a chat box again. Oh, thank you. Emma is mentioned, given it's not much more than 20 years since the first digitization of LBTH archives was started, I think it's astonishing how much has been achieved. Thank you. Yes. Yes, I mean, I've not been there 20 years or even 10 years, but yes, it has come a long way. And certainly we're looking into sort of digital preservation software for the future. So again, we always have to stay 1 or 2 or even 3 steps ahead of the curve. Anyone in the sector knows how quickly things change in terms of preservation. So, yeah. So yes. Thank you very much. Just responding to some people on the chat box. So we're at 5:56 now. If there's no other, please go ahead, Jen.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, the guide. Yes.
I just wanted to just pop a link to one of our research guides, which is called Collections Related to Built Environment. So I know we've showed you like 2 collections that are basically not accessible at the moment, but there's loads of stuff in the library and archives that is accessible now that does relate to the built environment. So I'm just going to pop the link to that research guide in the chat. Just give me one moment.
This is fresh off the press, really. We've just updated all of this. Jen and the others have been working lots on all of our research guides. So yeah, we hope it helps. We hope it gets some of your research going.
Now, I said, can I find it? Oh wait, here we are. Yeah, I've got it. 1 minute. I'm just going to put the link in the chat. 1 moment. There's also lots of other user guides that myself and my colleagues have uploaded recently. They are a wealth of information, just a way to navigate our collections on certain subjects. We have migration, we have politics and campaigning coming up. There's loads of subjects that just basically help you find the collections relating to it. So yeah, just have a look on our website. This particular research guide is pretty interesting.
Thank you, Genova. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, there's not much left to until, oh, let's mention the evaluation.
Yep.
Jen's just going to pop the evaluation into the chat box. It takes literally a minute. We'd love to hear your thoughts. This is a very different sort of event for us to do, actually. It's not our usual sort of topic. It's much more behind the scenes, and it's not stuff that's readily available. So if you liked it, let us know. If you wanted to see more of something or less of something, just let us know.
Can I just ask?
Please.
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I just wondered, do you have other? And it may be something it may very well be something I've missed. But did you say that you've got other documentation? So in terms of things like you might have letters, you might have, I don't know, diaries, you might have other sort of archival records that might connect with inhabitants of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets that actually researchers might be able to access?
Definitely. I mean, our collections, primarily people come to us with an interest in people in borough and the history of the borough's residents. So some of our most popular topics are things like around migration. Some of our most popular inquiries are around family history. So certainly most people start with the residents. It's very interesting that you're starting the other way around, actually. So yeah, I mean, it's your interest, isn't it? So yeah, we're very used to talking about the residents and the people in the borough. And I mean, we have our image collections, our newspaper cuttings, archives have personal papers, oral histories. All of this will support you in sort of learning more about the history of the residents who have been in the borough.
Yeah. And we're opening again tomorrow. Is our first day opening again, so the public can come and look at our wonderful collections again. But I've put a link to our website, so please go on our website and look at visitor information. And I think all the slots are booked for this month, but we can take bookings for the new year. So please just have a look. Our online catalogue is on there as well. So type in subject, terms, whatever you're interested in, and just see what you can access and book through us to see on the day. So everything you see on the catalogue when you're searching is everything that's accessible. We've just showed you everything that's not, but everything else is. So there's not that many restrictions. It's just for this particular these two particular collections, the restrictions are kind of there, but for everything else we have thousands and thousands of stuff available.
Yep. Amazing. Okay. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us this evening and for your incredible insights. I've honestly gotten a lot out of that, so thank you so much. Please stay in touch. You could come through our local history inbox with any inquiries that might have been sparked off through our talk. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please do fill out the forms. The YouTube link for this should be available within a week or two, so please just pop into our YouTube if you want to listen to it all over again and again and again. And other than that, have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much. Thank you, Genova, as well, for supporting and leading parts of the presentation. Have a good evening.
Thank you for having me again, Halima.
Oh, Jen's leaving us soon.
I know.
Maternity leave.
My maternity, yeah.
I'm gonna stop recording so I don't cry.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. You've been great. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a good evening.
Where does it? Ah, there it is.